From Washington, D.C. to the heart of America, welcome to Mark Alford's Capitol Recap. I'm Congressman Mark Alford from Missouri, your voice and your vote in Washington. You know, we recorded the last of our regular show, formerly named Mark Alford's America, so we want to welcome you to our new program entitled Mark Alford's Capitol Recap. So much happens here on Capitol Hill each week. We want to give you a behind-the-scenes look, really, of what goes on here. We want to cover it all for you, giving an insider's look into the complex happenings of Washington, D.C. Well, as many of you know, this week we celebrated the historic inauguration of President Donald J. Trump. It is a new day in America, the golden age, as the president says, and what a surreal experience it was to be in the Capitol Rotunda. Of course, we had a lot of guests up here from our district and from the Kansas City area. It was a tight fit. All the president's family, of course, his supporters, the cabinet was there, as well as all the senators and the congressmen and women who make up the 430-odd members of Congress. We were packed into the rotunda. I think one of the most surreal experiences, though, was when Carrie Underwood, the music did not play the instrumental accompaniment for her on God Bless America, and we all sang together in unison, God Bless America, in the Capitol Rotunda. That was pretty awesome moment. It was just several weeks before that I was there in the Capitol Rotunda with my son, who came up to view the body of the late President Carter as he lay in state there. If you ever get a chance to come into Washington, please come by our office, Cannon 328. We'll set up a tour for you of the Capitol, which includes the Capitol Rotunda. Back in November, 77 million American voters really gave President Trump a mandate to get our country back on track. The difference between Democrats and Republicans is that our agenda is about opportunity, freedom, and America first. Their agenda is about control, dependence, and America last. The progressive Democrats' distorted reality is finally over, and we are ending the insanity. With Speaker Johnson, Senate Leader Thune, and President Trump, we have a trifecta really now. And we are going to deliver on that mandate, the mandate by you to get something done, to lower the costs, to secure our border, for energy dominance, to make our country respected once again on the world stage. President Trump and Vice President Vance made promises, and they have kept some of those promises already on day one. So on day one, President Trump signed into order 42 executive orders. He took 115 personal actions. He established more than 200 executive actions. He answered 60 minutes of questions from journalists, something you never saw Biden doing, all on the same day that he was sworn in. This guy has so much energy. It's like the Energizer Bunny almost. So here are some of the highlights from President Trump's day one accomplishments. They include the fact that he declared a national emergency at the U.S.-Mexican border. He unlocked the funding, allowing troops to be dispatched there to secure our border. And he's already repatriated illegals in our great nation. So they are getting the job done, and look for more of that to be done in the coming days. President Trump also withdrew from the Paris climate deal. Thank goodness. He also withdrew the U.S. from the World Health Organization. He put a freeze on federal hiring, and he ordered government workers back in their office. And I've talked about this before. It is crazy how many people are not showing up for work in the federal government. Not more than half a mile of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, more than 2 million square feet of office space, and only about 6% of the people are there at any given day. The same with the Small Business Administration. Really, at any government office, until now, you could only find about 5 to 6% of the people working from the office. We've got to get people back in these monstrous office buildings to get the job done for you, the American people. The president also signed an order to end a policy conferring citizenship to those born in the U.S., basically ending the birthright citizenship, where people are coming to America from other countries, having babies here, and those babies become U.S. citizens. He also ordered the government to recognize only genders assigned at birth, and he said in his inauguration speech, there are only two genders, male and female. He also designated Mexican drug cartels as terrorist organizations. That will go a long way in fighting the fentanyl problems that are plaguing our great nation, killing hundreds and thousands of U.S. citizens each and every year. And he also established the Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE. Elon Musk is going to lead that up. It's going to be inside the executive branch, not Congress necessarily. It doesn't have Article 1 authority. But we'll be talking about DOGE a little bit later in our second segment with the chair of the DOGE caucus, Aaron Bean. But first, here's some of the important legislation that we passed this week. I want to start out talking about the Laken Riley Act. This was the first bill signed into law by President Trump in his second term. It really mandates the detention of illegal aliens who are accused of non-violent crimes. So the Laken Riley Act is named in honor of Laken Riley. She was a nursing student from Georgia who was tragically murdered in February of last year, almost a year ago, by an illegal alien named Jose Antonio Ibarra. He had prior theft charges. The government had put him up free of charge at the Roosevelt Hotel, not too far from Times Square in New York City. Thousands of illegal aliens are staying there right now on your dime. And he had committed some crimes in New York, but they did not detain him there, did not deport him. I think theft was one of them. And then he went to Georgia, where he continued his crime spree. He was arrested again there. They let him out, and he ended up killing Laken Riley, a very brutal murder. In response to that, my good friend Mike Collins, congressman from Georgia, introduced the Laken Riley Act last year. It passed, but of course failed in the Democrat Senate. So it was time to refile this for this year to make sure that it becomes law, and that's exactly what Mike Collins did. And look, I salute Mike Collins. He's a great American, a great legislator, a friend of mine, and I wanted you to hear in his own words from his floor speech on the Laken Riley Act why it was so important to him to make sure this becomes law. This week is also the annual March for Life here in Washington, D.C. Thousands of people will be marching here in the cold, supporting life in America. We also passed the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act once again this year. It was introduced last year. The Senate didn't vote for it. Again, just this week, though, the Senate did not have the votes to bring it to the House floor. Senator Lankford of Oklahoma introduced it on the Senate side. Congresswoman from Missouri, Ann Wagner, introduced this bill last year. She introduced it again this year. We passed it in the House. Advocates like Wagner and Melissa Oden. Melissa, by the way, is an abortion survivor from Missouri. You may have heard her story. These are amplifying this message that life is precious. Melissa was born alive after a failed saline infusion abortion in 1977, and now she's really one of the most powerful voices for abortion survivors. She spoke at our prayer rally this past November as we were working to defeat Amendment 3 in Missouri. I want you to hear some of her compelling story.
I'm here to tell you this is also what abortion looks like. This idea of reproductive freedom, that somehow abortion is a choice and a right. Danny is living to say, no, I've experienced it, and that's not what abortion is. And I'm here as the other side of the story, the baby who survived their own abortion, to say there is no freedom to be found in abortion. And that is my challenge often to people, even when we talk about this amendment, to say, if abortion is such a choice and a right, where was the choice of my birth mother, Ruth, who lives in Odessa, who was forced by her family at the age of 19 to have an abortion? How do you reconcile this concept of abortion being a right with the fact that if I wouldn't have survived, I would never have the ability to have a right? Our hearts know the answer. Our hearts know the answer. And I know that's why you're here tonight. And I'm going to share a little bit of my journey with you, but I also, first of all, want to thank you. And I want to thank Congressman Alford for putting this together and for what you do every single day for our state, for women and children and families. That is countercultural, but I'm here for it.
And there you have the story of Melissa Oden, who is an abortion survivor. When we come back on Mark Alford's Capitol Recap, a deep dive into DOGE. What is the Department of Government Efficiency? We'll talk about that with the caucus chair, my friend, Congressman Aaron Bean of Florida. Stay with us. You're listening to Mark Alford's Capitol Recap. Welcome back to Mark Alford's Capitol Recap, where we cover pretty much everything that we did in Washington. We talked about the Laken Riley Act, the Born Alive Act. Now we're talking DOGE. Everyone wants to know about the Department of Government Efficiency, previously led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who may be out of it now. We'll get into that. But the chair of the DOGE caucus is in our office here in the Cannon office building. My friend Aaron Bean from Florida. Aaron, welcome.
Mark Alford, what a treat it is. I never knew what a grand palatial office you have. So,
Well,
a built-in studio right here. So, office.
we're trying to make it feel like home. I want everyone who comes here to feel welcome, like it's a living room. I don't have a desk. I think a big desk or a big sign of power, and I'm not about power. I'm about the people.
10-4. No, I can attest to that, Mark Alford. You and I served on the Small Business Committee together for 2 years.
Yeah.
And you rocked the mic several times. And every time we had a witness, you just ripped into them. So don't let your constituents know that you're just a nice guy. When you have to be, you can be very aggressive, as you should have been. I know together we have fought the former SBA administrator who has lost $200 to $600 billion in fraud, and you
want to recover it.
And they want to let it go. Good gravy.
Yeah.
We want our money back. And you were a co-sponsor of my "We Want Our Money Back" to say, don't let it go. We want our money back.
You have labeled Washington, D.C. as crazy town. I love that because that's what it is up here. It's crazy town. And that gets into DOGE and the spending and how we're going to recapture this money. We are $36 trillion in debt. We have a $1.5 trillion in interest payments every year.
For the first time ever, our interest payments are greater than what we spend on our defense.
It's great.
And that's a shame. So, Mark Alford, this could be our last opportunity to turn the ship around. I gave a talk the other night, and if you could go back in time and have a time machine to tell the captain of the Titanic, hey, you need to change course.
You're going to hit an iceberg.
He would say, first of all, this ship is unsinkable. This ship is the greatest to ever be. We will not be sinking. And two, we've got spotters, and I don't see an iceberg. And he would say, be gone with you, future man. The United States right now, we're on the ship. We see the iceberg. We can see it ahead of us. And our response is not only not to turn, but to pull the throttle back and approach that iceberg at a greater rate of speed. Mark Alford, here's something that's sad for me to say. The DNA of the throttle that's pulling back on the ship has both Republicans and Democrats' fingerprints. We're both to blame.
Right.
So enough. And I believe with the 77 million Americans that told Donald Trump, clean this thing up.
When I say that's good, don't misinterpret me. It's good that we're both complicit, but it's also good that Democrats have come on board the DOGE caucus to try to find an answer.
It is. And listen, it's approaching it. In fact, our friends in the financial service sector say we're approaching a time where when investing in the United States becomes more risky, and we're approaching that because they know there's a critical red line when we cross, we're not going to be able to come back. So now is the time we got to strike high. We've got to cut spending. Part of that is making government more efficient. Let me talk about the three little circles of DOGE. We all know that what's gotten so much attention is the work group that Donald Trump has created, that now this has just happened with one of his executive orders. He's brought DOGE in under the government wing. It's taken over
To the executive branch.
to the executive branch. So he's made it an official part. It's no longer just sitting out there in his advisory role. He's actually brought it in, and it's part of the federal government. This work group that will sunset July 4th, he's already put it in there, so this is just limited time only. Elon Musk, I think Vivek is moving on. I think
To run for governor.
the run for governor. So you've got this work group, and that work group is primarily, and we've already seen it, coming out of the gate with executive orders. We've had a record number of executive orders, many of which are going to lead to savings. You can track that savings. We have the debt clock.
Right.
There's also a DOGE clock now that's counting the savings of what DOGE is doing.
What has already been identified under the DOGE to claw back this money? Where's this money coming from?
Well, it is money that is saved when we roll back things, when we reset, as these executive orders have. When I last looked at the clock, we had already saved $8 billion, which sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, but in the big scheme of things of trillions, it's not there yet. We've got a long way to go. But guess what? It's a start.
When you balance your checkbook, I don't know if you still have a checkbook, and I'm not very good about balancing, those little things add up over time.
They do.
And you can go into a deficit spending on your checking account very easily.
100%.
Because the little things, the Starbucks that add up,
Yeah.
the little $3 and $4 here and there.
The umpteen number of subscriptions that you have that you're not aware of.
Yeah.
So you've got that. They're working. It's working right now. And they're just getting started. You have now the House, and Speaker Johnson and James Comer on the Oversight Committee have created DOGE Committee, an official committee of the United States House of Representatives that is chaired by Marjorie Taylor Greene. That will have oversight, investigating problems and overspending. So they'll have subpoena power.
So this is the Speaker Select Committee?
This is a committee that is under the
Under oversight.
Under oversight.
Subcommittee.
That's exactly right. There's also an oversight committee that's chaired by Pete Sessions from Texas, who also is part of the DOGE caucus leadership team. He's also going to be investigating fraud, waste, and abuse. So you've got these two committees that are also out there. So that's the second ring of DOGE.
One of the big abuses I see, and I saw it here 2 years ago, the number of federal employees who should be at these massive buildings here. The USDA Department of Ag has 2 million square feet. On any given day, there's only 6% of the employees there. I've been screaming about this for 2 years. I tried to get into these buildings to see for myself. They wouldn't let us in. I introduced the Congressional Access to Bureaucratic Offices to let congressmen and women in these buildings. They don't want us in because they don't want to see how few people are there, wasting government money.
Representative Alford, I am aware of your bill. I am a co-sponsor of your bill, and it's not right. And members of Congress, we should be allowed anywhere to look in. That's part of our congressional role, is oversight of how the federal government, and particularly the executive branch, 30 days.
Yeah.
You got 30 days to get back to work. That's going to be exciting.
But if we end up not using these buildings, let's sell them off and save the money.
There's like 3 proposals to have new museums for the federal government to build a museum. We need to create them. They're on the mall. Let's let them be a museum rather than build anything new. We'll figure that out as it goes, but it is a mess. It is a mess. I'll tell you about the third ring is this caucus. This caucus is a voluntary thing for members that have a like-minded interest of shrinking the size of the federal government to cut spending. We just crossed 100 members.
I'm in it.
Yes, you are. I was going to brag on you. You are in it, and but one of the first to join as well. So we are trying to harness the energy. We've reached out. We've got members of the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
I think we can get more. I'm trying to create a safe harbor where they feel comfortable to come in. We will not agree on everything, but there are things we will agree on, and that's where we need to start. You know that everything we do here, because of the razor-thin majority margins, it has to be unanimous before we can agree on something. So DOGE caucus will be a different route to get bills across the finish line that are bipartisan, that will make government efficient. And that's what the Americans demand right now.
So the caucus will find these additional savings, cost-cutting measures, waste, abuse, and fraud that we can recommend to this subcommittee and the executive branch as well.
We can. And Chairman Greene has come to our caucus. She's a member of our DOGE caucus as well. So we're working with her, but we're just trying anything to get things done in the House of Representatives. You can't go alone. You got to have a team. You got to have strength in numbers. So this caucus adds that strength where we can work together. We divide it up into teams. We've got a DOGE Day plan where we're going to launch a handful of DOGE bills. I know you've got a couple in your back of your head that are on the why. Look at your whiteboard right now that you're still working on things, but we can launch them together and see what we can save. We're really trying to put some numbers on the board so we can get that DOGE clock rocking, because this may be our last chance.
Of course, we can try to save all the money we want to in the discretionary spending. The biggest chunk of our budget is mandatory spending, 76%, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Eventually, we are going to have to take a look, and I think it's going to happen as well. We've talked about this, not cutting benefits to anyone who's already earned them, who's on Social Security, but looking at ways that we can we can root out the waste, abuse, and fraud in the Medicare and Medicaid system as well.
It's horrendous. That's going to be ripe for picking. And you're exactly right. It is not the intention of anyone to cut anybody that's earned any benefits. But for young people right now, if there's maybe a chance that they were to delay their retirement, they could retire on a much richer benefit package by delaying a few years. And I think that's something that we're going to look at. I know time is of the essence. We're about to go. Mark Alford, I got to tell you what I did. I got to tell you what I did over our Christmas break. I drove to your district. You have a marvelous military base. It's Fort Leonard Wood.
Yes.
In the heart of your district. So my son was assigned there for 6 months. And he asked me to drive him there. He wanted his car there. So
you drove to
him,
Fort Leonard Wood in Pulaski County.
from Florida. That's exactly right. And beautiful. We just had a blast.
Missouri, the Ozarks, beautiful though.
Absolutely beautiful. And I'm amazed how big Fort Leonard Wood actually is. And so joint bases or joint branches of the military all practice and train there. Walker Bean, though, Walker Bean says, Dad, it's very cold. Very cold.
Well, it is now, but wait, this summer, it will be very hot.
Yeah.
And it will be in these long runs.
Yeah. His canteen was a rock. He brought water in the canteen, and they're in the mountains right now training and whatnot.
So, we have a very good general there, General
So
Beck.
Yeah, I met with him. Great leadership.
Well, thank you to Walker for signing up to serve our nation.
We're proud of him. Absolutely.
Aaron, I'm proud to be your friend. Thank you so much.
Mark Alford, you're doing great things, and I just want your constituents to know you're a fighter, you're a doer, and I'm proud of you. And we're just getting started, Mark Alford.
We are. We're just getting started. Until next week, I'm your voice and your vote in Washington, Congressman Mark Alford. Good day, and God bless.